There are three Parkinson's connections researchers are talking about right now that honestly made me stop and say, wait a second. Because when you live with Parkinson's, one of the questions that never fully goes away is why? Why did this happen? Why me? Why them? Why now? And for a lot of people, there's no clean answer. No family history, no obvious warning sign, no one thing that you can point to and say, that's it. That's what caused it. But researchers are starting to connect some dots. And today, I'm bringing you three of them. One involves something that can live quietly in the body. One involves something so normal, so everyday, that a lot of us may have brought into our homes, our cars, and our closets for years without even thinking twice. And one of them may already be sitting beside your bed every night giving you some attitude. And I'm not giving that one away yet, but when you hear it, you are definitely going to say, who knew?
Welcome to Living with Parkinson's. The good, the bad, and the reality. Real talk, real life, real community with Bryce Perry. Let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the broadcast. I'm Bryce. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 40, and I've been living with it now for over 15 years. And because this is the third week of the month, you know what that means around here. It's officially Who Knew Week. Once a month, we take real Parkinson's research, some strange science, new discoveries, and things most of us never hear in the neurologist office, and we break them down into normal human language. Today, I've got three possible connections that researchers are looking at more closely. Now, track which one hits you the hardest, because I want to hear in the comments at the end. Okay? The biggest who knew for you. And here we go. The first connection starts with something scientists used to think was mostly harmless. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever science says, don't worry, it's probably harmless, my Parkinson's brain immediately says, are you sure? Because I've learned the hard way that probably harmless and we fully understand this are not in the same sentence. Now, this can live quietly in the bloodstream. A lot of people may never even know that they have it or carry it. And for years, it was not really considered a major concern. But then researchers started looking somewhere very specific. Not in the blood, not in the general health records. They looked inside the brain. And what they found was not subtle. Researchers at Northwest Medicine studied brain tissue from people who had Parkinson's and compared it to the brain tissue for people who did not have Parkinson's. And they found something called human pegivirus, or HPGV, in the brains of 5 out of 10 people with Parkinson's, 50%, and 0 out of 14 people who didn't have Parkinson's, 0. Now let's be careful here. This does not mean that HPGV caused Parkinson's in everyone. It does not mean that everyone who's had that virus will get Parkinson's. It does not mean that we've solved the mystery. If Parkinson's were that simple, we'd not still be having neurologist appointments that feel like a group project between a detective, a pharmacist, and a very tired circus clown, right? But 5 out of 10 versus 0 out of 14 is not something to just shrug it off. It's a signal, and signals matter. HPGV is a blood-borne virus, all right? It has often been described as symptomless, and for a long time, it was not known to cause disease. But this research suggests that in some people, it may interact with the immune system and possibly with genetic risk factors in ways that researchers did not fully understand before. And that's where this gets really interesting, because Parkinson's may not always be one thing causing one outcome. It may be combinations of things. A person's genetics, their immune system, their environment, a virus, an exposure, a trigger or a vulnerability. And then one day the system tips. Again, that's not a proven causation, and that's important, but it's a door researchers now open. And once that door opens, the next questions matter. Could viruses trigger Parkinson's in some people? Could antiviral approaches ever matter? Could immune response be part of the story? Could this explain why some people have no family history and still develop Parkinson's? We don't know yet, but researchers are asking. And that's where progress starts. Who knew? A virus once thought to be mostly harmless might be connected to Parkinson's in some people. Now, the second connection is one that honestly made me mad. And not because chemical exposure itself is brand new. A lot of us have heard about chemicals and Parkinson's. We've heard about pesticides. Some people have heard about industrial solvents, and some people have heard about contaminated water. And a lot of people have heard names like TCE or other chemicals that are about as easy to pronounce as a sneeze on a lab coat. The part that got me is how normal some of this may have been. Not a factory, not a lab, not some industrial site with warning signs and people in hard hats. I'm talking about something a lot of people have done for years without giving it a second thought. You know what it is? Dropping clothes off at the dry cleaner. Picking them up in that plastic bag, hanging them in your closet, putting them on for work, for church, for weddings, for funerals, meetings, dinners, and life. And never once thinking, could there be a chemical story here? And that's the part that hit me. Because when we say chemical exposure, we picture someone working in a plant or standing beside a barrel with a skull and crossbones label on it. You know what I mean? But dry cleaning, that feels different. That feels ordinary. That feels like a Tuesday. And that is why this one made me so mad, because I started thinking about my own life. From the time I was about 20 years old, I worked jobs where I had to dress up. Suit and tie or tie and a dress shirt. That was just part of the job. You got dressed. You looked professional. You wore the shirt. You wore the jacket. You dropped stuff off at the dry cleaner on a regular basis. You picked it up. You put it in your car. You brought it home. You hung it in your closet. You wore it again. And then you go back to the dry cleaner. And I did that for years and years and years. And never once thought, I wonder what chemical was used on that shirt. Not once. I was just trying to go to work without looking like I slept in a laundry basket. Which, honestly, with Parkinson's stiffness, some mornings that is still the way I look whether I try or not. But back then, dry cleaning was normal. It was almost responsible. You were taking care of your clothes. You were showing up properly. You were doing what adults were supposed to do. And now you read about dry cleaning, solvents, and Parkinson's risk, and you think, wait a second. How many people were exposed to this kind of stuff and had no idea? How many people worked in dry cleaning? How many people wore dry cleaning clothes for decades? How many people had those clothes hanging in their closets, sitting in their cars, wrapped in plastic, smelling like what we thought was just clean? That's the hooky part. That's the part most of us still don't know. The chemical conversation is not only about some faraway industrial site. It may also be about everyday habits that felt harmless. Now, the chemicals often discussed in this area include solvents like TCE, triochloroethylene, and PCE, also called PERC or perchloroethylene. I can never say these words, which has been commonly associated with dry cleaning. Now, these are chemicals that have been used in cleaning, degreasing, industrial work, and dry cleaning operations. And researchers, including people like Dr. Ray Dorsey, have been raising the alarm that these kinds of environmental exposures may be part of the Parkinson's conversation. Now, let me be very clear. This does not mean that every person who dry clean clothes is going to get Parkinson's. It doesn't mean that your old suit jacket sitting in the closet is plotting against your dopamine. It doesn't mean that you should run upstairs and start yelling at your blazer like it owes you an apology. But it does mean that this conversation is bigger than most people realize. Because for years, dry cleaning was treated like this classy little errand. Drop the clothes off and pick them up. Right? They came back pressed, cleaned, wrapped in plastic, smelling like a professional adult. Nobody handed us a warning label. Nobody said, maybe air these out. Nobody said, maybe do not bring that straight into a small closet. Nobody said, you may want to know what chemicals are being used here. It was just normal. And sometimes that's what makes environmental risk so frustrating. It hides inside normal. It hides inside routine. It hides inside habits that people are never warned about. That is why this matters. Not because it gives everyone a perfect answer, because Parkinson's is not that simple, but because pieces matter. Your history matters. Your environment matters. Your job matters. your I wore dry clean clothes for years matters. Who knew? In the comments, did you dry clean? Did you dry clean your clothes? How many people dry clean their clothes? I'd really love to see a straw poll on this one. Okay, quick pause before number three. Number three is wild. If this episode's making you think of someone, share it with them, please. Not to scare them, not to diagnose them, but because there are people walking around with pieces of their story that nobody ever helped them connect the dots to. Now, if you're ready for it, this is number three. Hold on to your hats for this one. This is the one that may hit home for a lot of people. The third connection might already be sitting in your bedroom, maybe on your nightstand, maybe in a drawer, maybe in a box, maybe in the place where you keep things that you swear you are absolutely going to use properly starting Monday. And if you know, you know. What I'm talking about is sleep apnea. And more specifically, untreated obstructive sleep apnea. Now, before anybody gets defensive, let me say this. I am not here to shame anyone about a CPAP machine. I know CPAPs are annoying. I know masks are uncomfortable. I know the hose can make you feel like you're sleeping as a low-budget astronaut. And I know some people try it for 2 nights and then quietly banish it to the closet like it insulted the family. So this is not a guilt trip. But this new research changes the conversation. Because this is not just about snoring. Researchers looked at more than 11 million US veterans. More than 11 million. Now, this isn't a tiny study. This is not, we asked 7 people, and one guy named Larry had thoughts. This is huge. And the study found that people with untreated obstructive sleep apnea had a higher risk of developing Parkinson's. What? Who knew? Nearly double in some reportings. And here's the part that really matters. People who treated their sleep apnea with a CPAP, especially earlier, appeared to reduce the risk. That's the piece that changes the tone, because it means that this is not only a warning, it's also an action point. Now, let's talk about why this might matter biologically. With obstructive sleep apnea, your airways get blocked during sleep. Your breathing pauses. Your oxygen levels can drop. Your body wakes up enough to restart breathing, even if you don't fully remember it. And then it happens again, and again, and again. Night after night, month after month, year after year. That repeated oxygen dip can stress the brain. It can contribute to inflammation. It can affect repair processes. It can create strain in a system that is supposed to be recovering while you sleep. Now, we know sleep is a big part of your brain health. We know many people with Parkinson's have sleep issues. And we know fatigue, brain fog, mood, movement, and medication response can all be affected by sleep. So when a study this large connects untreated sleep apnea with Parkinson's risk, we need to pay attention. And if CPAP treatment appears to reduce that risk, we should really pay attention. No panic, just pay attention. Because this is one of those areas where people may actually be able to do something. They can get tested. They can use the machine. They can talk to the doctor about mask fits. They can try different mask styles. I know they can ask about pressure settings. Do not just give up after one bad night and sentence the CPAP to life in the closet. And if you're the person with the CPAP machine and you hate it, I get it. But I want you to think about it differently now. That machine may not be punishment. It may be protection. It may be one of the most annoying little bodyguards that you ever own. Does it look cool? No. Does it make bedtime feel like you're preparing for deep sea diving in pajamas? Maybe. But if it helps protect your brain, maybe it deserves another chance. And I want to say this carefully. I'm not telling anyone to start, stop, or change treatment without talking to a doctor. That is between you and your healthcare team. But if you do have sleep apnea, or you suspect you might, this is worth taking seriously. Bring it up. Ask your doctor about it. And if you already have that machine but you hate it, ask for help making it work better. Because sometimes the best treatment is not the one that looks cool. Sometimes it's the one that hums beside your bed like a tiny plastic Darth Vader, and helps you breathe. Who knew untreated sleep apnea could be connected to a higher risk of Parkinson's, and that treating it may reduce the elevated risk? Unbelievable. Who knew? And that's just not a snoring conversation anymore. That is a brain health conversation. And for some people, that could be the wake up call that they needed. Pun was intended. Very intended. Okay, now it's time for Carmen's Care Partner Corner, and here's what Carmen, my wife, wrote for me to read to you today. The part that hit me the hardest in this episode was the dry cleaning and the environmental exposure piece. Because care partners carry the why too. We wonder if something could have been different. We wonder if we missed something. We wonder if there was a sign that we should have noticed earlier. And when you hear about dry cleaning, chemicals, and workplace exposure and people who were never warned, it can bring up a lot of emotion. What I want people to hear is this. You did not cause this. Your person did not cause this. Most people were doing the best they could with the information they had at the time. They went to work, they dressed for work, they served, they provided, they lived their lives. And if exposure was part of the story, then the blame does not belong to the person who got sick. It belongs in the systems that failed to protect people and failed to warn them. Understanding the why is not about guilt. It's about truth. To the care partners watching, you're allowed to feel angry. You're allowed to feel sad. You're allowed to say, I wish we'd known. That's not weakness. That's love. And I love that. Because this disease does not just take movement. It takes certainty. It takes the clean, simple story we wish we had. And sometimes even a partial answer can bring up a lot. Awesome. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you so much. So if today's episode stirred something in you, that's okay. This is heavy stuff, but heavy does not mean hopeless. Heavy means important. Now I want to hear from you. Which one surprised you the most? The one that lived quietly in the body, the one that's connected to something many of us treated as totally normal, or the one that might be happening while you sleep? And did one of these connect with your own story? Drop that in the comments, because your story may help someone else connect a dot that they've been staring at for years. All right, you made it this far. Here is your Bryce-ism of the episode. With Parkinson's, knowing why does not change the diagnosis, but it can lighten the backpack. And some of us have been carrying that thing so long, it should have its own luggage tag. Well, there you go. Until next time, I want you to keep showing up. I want you to keep being real. And I want you to keep doing life today. I love you, and I'll see you on the next episode.